Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended. Today is Thursday, March 25th, and my name is Ryan Hulsebos. Thank you all for joining us here for our second episode of Goal Line Extended, a brand new show out of the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today, we've got a big show lined up. Austin Owens will be joining me in a moment as we preview the 2021 PLL entry draft set to go down tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces. On Tuesday, Pat Gregoire and I talked about the Cannons, Atlas, and Water Dogs, what they might do with their first round picks, picking first and sixth, third and fourth respectively. Today, Austin and I will look at the Archers pick at number 2, the Chrome at 5, and the Whipsnakes at 7, and what the Chaos might do with the 8th selection to close out the first round. We'll also be taking a look at the mock draft that our Lacrosse Flash team put together and giving some of our thoughts on what we think about that. And then a little later, Liam Kelly will be joining me, Lacrosse Flash PLL and college lacrosse writer. We'll be discussing some of the big college lacrosse games set to go down this weekend, headlined by number 4 Syracuse taking on number 2 Duke tonight, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch it on the ACC network. We also have an ACC battle between Virginia and Notre Dame on Saturday. TD Erlin will be making his debut for Denver against Providence, and number 5 Rutgers will be hosting number 3 Maryland in a rematch of Maryland's win a few weeks ago. And to close out today's show, Whipsnakes face-off specialist Joe Nardello will be joining me, hence the Whipsnakes jersey. It was a Christmas present to myself. We'll be talking the upcoming PLL season, the 2020 PLL Championship Series, and then Rutgers and Maryland, which is set for this Sunday. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Anchor, and hopefully soon on many more podcast platforms. And you can follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links, as well as the Lacrosse Flash website and social media, will be down below in the description as well. Austin Owens, welcome to Goal Line Extended. As I said on Tuesday, Austin and I have been putting in some serious hours to get this show put together and ready. We'll be putting in a few tonight to get this thing ready for upload. But for the next 20 minutes, Austin, we get to talk some lacrosse. So let's get right to it. On Tuesday, Pat and I talked about the Cannons. He said that there's absolutely no chance that even with Lyle Thompson not yet signed to the PLL entry draft player pool, as according to the PLL website as of Wednesday afternoon, there's no chance that he won't be the first overall pick to the Cannons. That is a lock that he will be. He also likes Ben Randall as possibly the second poll taken to the Atlas at number 3, possibly the first. And Canadian midfielder Challen Rogers to the Water Dogs with the 5th overall pick, a pick that I know you like as well there for Coach Copeland and the Water Dogs. One team that we didn't talk about and that we will talk about today is the Archers. Head coach Chris Bates holds the 2nd overall pick in this draft, essentially able to pick whoever he deems as the best player available behind Lyle Thompson. He has a few different directions that he can go in. He recently acquired attackman Connor Fields from Chaos. He sent midfielder Ian McKay over to the Chaos in that trade. Comments by Bates after that trade makes it seem like Fields will be used in a variety of different ways, as an attackman, as a midfielder out of the box. So it seems like the likely route will probably be a defenseman, or as I'm possibly thinking too, slim possibility, a face-off man in the form of Max Adler with the 2nd pick of this draft. But Austin, I know you and Tino Farah, who made the Archers selection in our Flash mock draft, you guys like defenseman Graham Hossack. How do you think he'll fit into this Archers defense that did just lose a key piece in Curtis Corley to expansion?
Thank you for having me on, Ryan, first of all. And as I said to you guys after I saw this recording, I did not agree to this tire pumping that you gave me the other day. That was more than kind. I really appreciate it. When you look at this draft, I mean, Pat said it perfectly. There's one guy with a bullet that you put on this board, and it's Lyle Thompson. I'm going to put a second guy in there, and Tino did a great job with our mock, and it's Graham Hossack. And if you don't know anything about Graham Hossack, or you don't know his resume in the field game, that's understandable. I think he went to Lindenwood University or college. I can't remember the school off the top of my head. Sort of a smaller school, but he is an absolute monster. If you watch him in the indoor game, the indoor league, quote unquote, the NLL for everybody else, his play with the Halifax Thunderbirds and the Rochester Nighthawks has been nothing short of unbelievable. They call him the cyborg up there, and he's an absolute machine, man. He's just a big body. He literally, I don't know if you've seen the clip, he has literally picked up a grown man and thrown him to the ground like he's a child, and then went and scored a goal in transition a couple of years ago with the Nighthawks. He's just unbelievable, and he keeps getting better. That's the scary part. He's still young. He's still able to do everything possible under the sun, but he keeps getting better as a defender, which is the scariest part. I think he could play LSM if you really need him to. He could play, he's a nightmare short stick defensive midfielder if you need to. And he's a pole. a close defender. And I think I know Pat talked about Latrell Harris the other day and being a guy that you could really plug into different spots. You could put him on an attackman and he will beat the crap out of that guy. You could put him on a midfielder and he could stick with him as well. And most midfielders, he's going to body up and really make it a hard time. I was watching a video the other day and Rob Pennell was talking about, I believe it was the 4 guys in the MLL that made it the most difficult for him to score goals. And Graham Hossack was the last one he mentioned. He only played against him for 1 game maybe, or 2 games in the MLL. And that shows what just a nightmare he is to go up against. 3-time NLL Defensive Player of the Year. There's nothing more I can say about him. And Chris Bates talked about needing to get bigger and stronger on the defensive end as a close defender. I don't think you get a better option than Graham Hossack. I think he stands about 6'3", maybe close to 220, 230. Like, he is the guy. And, when we started doing our mock, he wasn't on the board quite away. We had to completely start the mock over again because he was that good. We had to start from pick 2 because Lyle's obviously a lock.
Completely from scratch because the fact that we said right away, and as Tino his rightful selection took Graham Hossack there at the second overall pick for the Archers. I like this. Reading Coach Bates's comments about wanting to get bigger, wanting to get stronger. I'm thinking you put Graham Hossack down low with Matt McMahon, who had led the league in caused turnovers in the 2020 PLL Championship Series, with Eli Gobrecht, who's gone from D3 stud to now covering the best players in the league every single game. You put those 3 together with Scott Ratliff at LSM. You already have Dominique Alexander to run as a short stick defensive midfielder. You have just brought in Connor Fields. That's the thing. It's like the Archers had a few needs. Possibly you could say they could have added another offensive player, but they just added Connor Fields. So now it's like, all right, what do we need to do? Yep. I'm thinking possibly face off, but I think a possible move that they could make in the college draft, possibly to go after TD Earl, and that's a conversation for another day. But the possibility does exist here that Max Adler is available because he won't be taken first overall. He is available, and a possibility there to take it second overall. But as I probably agree with you and Tino and most people that might be making predictions on this, I like Graham Hossack there at 2 with Eli Gobrecht and Matt McMahon and Scott Ratliff on this defense. That sounds scary. You think the Whipsnakes defense is scary. I think Graham Hossack adds a different element to this Archers defense that they probably need to these teams are all going to get better. So
he's a different kind of monster, man. Improve. You put him with Eli and you put him with McMahon. I believe was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year, McMahon. And you have Scott Ratliff, who's arguably, if not the best LSM in the league. That's a core to build with. And then you lose Curtis Corley. It is what it is. But then you also have guys like Mike Simon. You've got Jack Rapine. Like, Chris Bates is set up for success with this. I'm of the belief that you build from the back out. He's got a good goalie tandem still in Drew Adams and Adam Gittleman, excuse me, English Austin. And yeah, that D-core is unbelievable. And you talked about it. You have Dom Alexander, you've got Moose, Mark McNeil. You're laughing if you're the Archers and you're able to get Hossack at 2.
Definitely like the Archers taking Hossack at 2. Let's move on to the Chrome. They select 5th overall and also have the ability to go in a few different directions. In our Flash mock draft, Liam, who will be joining me very soon, he selected short stick defensive midfielder Zach Goodrich, the 2020 MLO Defensive Player of the Year, transition threat, incredible athlete. Austin, what does a guy like Goodrich bring to a Chrome team that just lost LSM Reese Eddy, who I spoke to on Tuesday, and midfielder Sam Duggan in expansion, 2 guys that were really important to their 2020 turnaround from the year before? What does a guy like Goodrich bring to this Chrome team?
Defensive stability is the main thing. And I mean, it speaks to how good he is as a player that he was almost named the MLL Defensive Player of the Year as a short stick defensive midfielder. Ridiculous that sounds just off the top. But Zach Goodrich, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of him, truth be told. I've watched tape of him at Towson. He's an absolute monster. He's got that, 6'2", 200-pound frame. He fills out. He can just absolutely body up guys at the top. He's got the speed and length to stick with anyone he wants to. And I think Liam said it perfectly in our mock. He's like having a 4th or 5th LSM or pole out there. He's just going to dominate. When you look at Chrome, how they're laid out right now, Tim Sudan, another team that I think is really well off. You lose Reese Eddy and you lose Jake Pulver in the expansion draft, but you have Joel White who's coming back. You've gone and got Jesse Bernhardt last year in the draft. You've got Mike Manley, who was your top close defender last year. You're set back there. And then you've also got Donnie Moss, who kind of a quiet championship series last year, but you've also got Haas. You've got some other midfielders. And then looking at it, I mean, that two-way midfield game, John Rannigan, absolute monster. Jordan McIntosh, I will say it time and time again. I love Jordan McIntosh, and he's probably one of the most underrated players in our sport. And then you got Ned Crotty, who had a huge championship series last year. So I think, again, building from the back out, Goodrich just does so much for this team, and he's going to make them better as a result of just him being so stable and being able to D up anyone. I think I've seen him go at guys from X as well as a short stick, which is just ridiculous.
Also, in terms of our mock draft, Randy Stotts, Dan Bucaro, they're still available. Just two of the names that I could absolutely see head coach Tim Student wanting to plug into his offense. We've heard comments from Student saying that he wants to try to find his next goalie, the heir apparent to John Galloway. We'll talk about the Chaos a little later and what they might do. But what do we think the chances are that Student comes out and takes a goalie here at 5?
Ooh, you see it. We didn't think about it until just a couple days ago when Sudan came out and said that
When he made those comments, yeah.
Yep. I don't think we were even looking at it because, I mean, you look at last year, John Galloway was fine. I mean, the Chrome, when you look at it, their defense was good. They had good CTO numbers. They had good ground ball numbers, but they just bled goals. And that was their biggest downfall, I think, in the end. And it's not John Galloway's fault. I think it's just a combination of things, sort of the quality of chances as well. The one game that sticks out to me is when Chrome jumped out to that huge lead on the Water Dogs during group play. And then the Water Dogs ended up coming back on them and tying it, sending it to overtime. I think I don't know what it is, but John Galloway is one of the best in the world still. Questionable style choices with the track pants during the middle of the summer, but we won't get into that. But yeah, I mean, when Tim Sudan said he was looking for the goalie of the future, that really perked up a lot of people's ears because John Galloway is he's not taking a dip at all. I don't think, at least from what I've seen the last 2 years, I think he's been very good. But obviously you lose a guy or you let a guy go in Brett Queener, who was a very steady backup for you, I think. And you need to add that next guy. And John Galloway's, I think, probably close to 35. So it's definitely time to start thinking about it and getting that next guy in. Maybe it's in the entry draft. There's certainly a lot of goalies you could go after, whether it's Nick Morocco, Sean Scanone, Brian Phipps comes to mind as another guy that could be a veteran ad. I know we had him in the mock. Or you could go with a guy like Drake Porter in the college draft. I think that might be a good way to go. It really depends on who's available, I think. And that's sort of all these teams. They've said, we've looked at X number of guys, but at the end of the day, you don't really know what the other team's going to do, especially with all the talent on this board. Like, we've gone back and forth, you know, as well as anyone, Ryan, that we've gone back and forth and said, well, this guy should be here. This guy should be up here. It's different levels. Like, we've gone and debated. I think in our 2 mock drafts, we had a couple guys that were taken in like the second round that ended up going top 5 in the next draft when we redid it.
Our first draft, Randy Stotts somehow slipped to the middle of the second round.
Our first draft, Pat Gregoire was I can't speak today. Pat Gregoire, he's going to get on me for that. Was laughing all the way to the bank. He took him at 12, I'm pretty sure, with the Water Dogs.
In our first one, yeah. Second one, he didn't make it.
He was calling them the Wagon Dogs, and fairly so. He had Challen Rogers and Randy Stotts off the top, and then we said, no. We're going to have to redo this. That's unfair. Yeah. In reality, it was because of Grant Hossack. But still, yeah, Randy Stotts is unbelievable.
Speaking of the goalie situation, too, I'm looking at the college draft because the Chrome hold the 3rd overall pick. The Chaos are down at 6, with the Archers at 5 ahead of them and the Redwoods ahead of them at 4. All 3 of those teams, Redwoods, Archers, Chaos, I look at as being in the face-off market and being in the TD Erlin sweepstakes. So if I am Chrome, I am holding on to that number 3 pick, especially looking at Chaos and looking at Dylan Ward saying, hey, if you want TD Erlin, here's the 3rd overall pick. And Dylan Ward will probably, I'd imagine, be somewhere involved in that trade with, I'd imagine, a lot more because I think there's Dylan Ward draws enough as it is in terms of trade value.
Oh, yeah.
Add that number 6 pick in there as well. Definitely could be a nice package for Tim Sudan and the Chrome. The Whipsnakes, 2-time defending PLL champions, they select 7th overall, were able to keep their main group together during expansion. And really, they didn't lose much in that draft. Max Tuttle and backup goalie Jake Stover, they were the only ones taken by the Cannons. So really looking at these 2 drafts in the offseason as a chance to build some depth and find some quality players to plug in with your already existing core. For our Flash mock draft, as I said, this was my selection. I'm going with short stick defensive midfielder Isaiah Davis-Allen. Really the only need, I think, for this team being short stick defense after the loss of Tuttle, the retirement of Ty Warner. We saw a few other retirements amongst midfielders, Joe Locasio, really strip this team of depth. But during this waiver period in the 2 drafts, expect Coach Stagnita and his staff to fill out the rest of this roster. But Austin, do you approve of my selection of Davis Allen at 7? There's a few attackmen available, some other polls. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I'm going to say right here on Goal Line Extended for the entire world to hear, Ryan, I really enjoyed that pick. I'm not going to make any.
There we go. That's what I like to hear.
If you're the Whip Snakes, I mean, you just lost Ty Warner, and good luck to Ty Warner, by the way, in his medical career.
Oh, yeah. I talked to Reese Eddy. I didn't bring it up in the interview, but Reese Eddy was a med student.
Yep.
And when I got him on the call originally, I was just kind of talking to him like back and forth. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
No.
I'm not doing it anymore. So props, not to put Reese on the spot, but props to Ty Warner for keeping going through with med school.
There's a reason only a certain number of people make it as
I
medical school students. It takes, I'm not saying anything about Reese. I'm saying it takes a certain kind of dedication that not all people really want to go through. And I don't blame them because it is a grind to try and go through that. But Ty Warner's gone back-to-back PLL champion. And when you look at it, I mean, what do the Whip Snakes need? They're stacked at attack. Brad Smith was a revelation. I don't know, revelation might not be a keyword, because I think he was somebody they really liked to start with. He just didn't have a spot in their 2019 squad. But he was fantastic.
Injuries his senior year at Duke played him into that first season.
Yeah, absolutely. Zed was Zed. Rambo was Rambo. Jay Carlson was a fantastic option when he got into the soft spots of the defense. You only lost Max Tuttle in the expansion draft, excuse me. So when you look at it, the only glaring need you already have one of the best defenses in the league, and you have Kyle Bernlohr, who's a fantastic goaltender. You don't need anything. You're adding depth, honestly. And that's all the funny thing about the Whip Snakes is they just kind of protected guys that didn't exactly play for them, but they just had extra spots because they had such a small roster and they only had their key guys they needed to keep. So TJ Comizio was a guy that came to mind. I thought he was going to be exposed, not because he's a bad player, but because they had Ty Warner. It turns out Ty retires, essentially, walks away for his medical career. Now you have TJ, and now you go out and get a guy like Isaiah Davis Allen, who's other than Goodrich, I'd say is the quintessential short stick defensive midfielder that you want to have in this draft if you're looking for that position. He's a standout at Maryland his entire career. He was a stud with the Bayhawks during the MLL bubble last year. He's the perfect guy to just plug and play into the system. And when you put him with, I don't know, who am I thinking of here? Jake Bernhardt. It's a pretty good duo.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a pretty good duo to me.
Yeah.
And the final pick of this first round belongs to the Chaos. Now, in last year's entry draft, Towers surprised a lot of people by going with goalie Dylan Ward. He's still on that roster. We talked just a moment ago about the chances that he might get traded. But sitting here at 8, no face-off man currently on the roster. What are Coach Towers' options here with the 8th overall pick?
If I'm Andy Towers, I am taking the first person I see off the board that has a Canadian flag next to their name. And yeah, that'll be it. In all seriousness, Andy Towers, the thing that he needs, it's like Canada's team. It's like I'm talking for him. What the Chaos need is a face-off specialist, first of all. Losing Tommy Kelly, regardless of what it says stats-wise last season, is a huge loss for them. Obviously, they left him exposed for the Cannons, and they ran that risk, and it bit him. I think you have Austin Henningsen still. He's unproven in the PLL. Obviously, he was just sort of picked up as a backup option. But when you look at it, I think that's first and foremost what they need to get. I mean, from what we've heard, I don't think Alex Woodall is going to be playing this summer. So the immediate one is Max Adler that you really look to. And he was a standout for the Denver Outlaws last year. I think he's your guy that you want to sort of plug in there. And I think he's a guy that you really look at as a number one and sort of a guy that you can trust. You don't really have to run a face-off combo if you don't want to. I know Chaos ran it a bit, maybe. The Water Dogs are really the team that sort of got away with it. The Water Dogs and the Archers with Kelly Fowler and then Simoneau and Withers. But most of the time, it's most of the PLL teams just going with one guy, and I think Adler can be that guy. But if you're looking at other positions, I mean, they just lost Deemer Class, which was an under-the-radar loss at the midfield position. They lose Connor Fields, obviously, to a trade. You could add another attackman if you want to. I like Chase Fraser. They brought him in from the player pool, but honestly haven't seen him play field lacrosse yet. So hell of a box player, but I don't know what he's going to be in the field game until we see him out on the field. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Miles Thompson, because depending on the status of his brother, which we still don't know at the time of filming, I I would assume that Miles would end up with Lyle at some point, but who knows? I don't think attacks really. I think you can address that in the waiver wire. I think losing at the defense is a bad thing for the Chaos. Sorry, I'm had a brain fart there for a sec. I think your defense, I don't know, Dan Coates and Jason Noble are very good. They're very good box players. They were sort of quiet in the championship series, which is good if you're a defenseman, but I didn't really notice them at any point sort of locking guys down, but they're steady pieces. But Pat talked about it. The guy I want to see on Chaos is Latrell Harris, and I would absolutely love to see him there. If not, maybe a Warren Jeffrey. I think he's a guy that is an absolute game changer physically. I think he'll just destroy some people on slides, and he's going to be a guy that PLL fans really like. But face off first, and then I think you either add to the midfield, maybe short stick defense or your close defense. I think those are sort of the main ideas for Archer's Chaos right now.
Speaking of Warren Jeffrey, in our Flash mock draft, Pat, who is selecting for the Water Dogs, he selected Warren Jeffrey. So just some context there to the conversation. But definitely Latrell Harris being an option there. I'm thinking, as me and Pat were talking about on Tuesday, probably a post-draft ad by a team. And then if you're the Cannons, I mean, you essentially have – it's a 24-pick draft. You essentially have pick 25, 26. I don't know if the PLL doesn't put a cap on how many players that Coach Quirk can add. I mean, the possibilities seem endless for Coach Quirk.
Who would you go with the 6th overall pick? Because the Cannons have 2 first-round picks.
If Randy Stotts is available, I'm taking Randy Stotts to pair with Lyle Thompson. I would make the same argument, I think, for Dan Bucaro. If Zach Goodrich slips to 6, Zach Goodrich, I think, is a lock. And I would say I wouldn't take a shot on goalie yet.
No, that's
I wouldn't take a bite at the goalie position yet, just because I think there's a lot of time. There's a lot of options in college. We're talking about Dylan Ward. Dylan Ward as a possibility to get traded somewhere. So I think goalie situation, you don't worry about it, but you focus on those guys, those top talented guys that are probably going to be available. One of them will be. So
I might have a hot take here, but I think if you're the Cannons, you take Randy Stotts to pair with Lyle Thompson. And in my head, I was thinking about it today when I was getting ready to hop on, is like, wouldn't it be a fun little thing if they went and got Randy Stotts, Lyle Thompson, and then on the waiver wire, you go and get Shane Jackson and you just add that Georgia Swarm trio? That would be maximum chaos. And even if you get the first 2 and you don't get Shane Jackson, I don't know if it's a hot take, but I think you have Lyle and Randy are so special together. And I've gotten to watch them for a number of years on Georgia with the NLL. They have such good chemistry. It's like, it might be up there with the best duo alongside your Jordan Wolfs and your Justin Gutterdings, your Zed and your Rambo. I think they're up there with the elite duos if you can get them in the expansion or entry. Getting my drafts mixed up today. It's been a long day, Ryan.
Absolutely. We also heard on Wednesday the PLO's Joe Keating. He's been Keegan. My apologies. I'm gonna start that over actually. We also heard on Wednesday the PLO's Joe Keegan. He has been interviewing the PLO head coaches, and during his interview with Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent, the only team we haven't talked about leading up to this draft, as he does not have a first-round pick. St. Laurent mentioned the thought to try to move up into the first round of this entry draft. He currently holds the 11th overall pick. Austin, first, how much do you think it will cost for the Redwoods to move up? And then who do you think St. Laurent might be targeting with that possible pick if he was to move up?
That is a good question, sir. I think Nat St. Laurent, when he was talking to Joe, made the point that at their, I think it's 11th overall pick, they have about 4 guys that they've sort of looked at that they're interested and think might slip to them, which is a benefit to them. In terms of what you might have to give up to get a pick, to move up a couple picks, like I don't think 11th overall is that bad with all the talent in this. You're still going to get a starting caliber player, but there might be, say, a Bucaro slips or maybe a Bryce Wasserman. I know you already have a strong attack unit. You don't really need an attackman, but maybe you use them as a combo midfielder, sort of how the Archers use, or not the Archers, well, the Archers and the Water Dogs use Christian Cuccinello the last couple of years. I don't know if you really want to pay the price to move up a couple picks because it's going to cost you draft capital in the college draft.
And the Redwoods don't have, it doesn't seem like that much draft capital. They just acquired Rob Pennell. Mm-hmm. They acquired Miles Jones last year, and I think that traded pick carries over into this draft, if I'm not mistaken. I
Yes.
might be wrong there.
They have the fourth
It
overall
just
pick in the
doesn't
college.
seem it doesn't seem like the Redwoods have that much draft capital. I mean, obviously they have the player talent, but do you want to part ways with that player talent? That comes the question.
The interesting thing to me with the Redwoods is I don't know why. I don't think it would. It's tough because maybe you do something where you pick up as another second round pick and you have two guys in close proximity to each other, where you go from like the 9 to 10 pick and get another guy where you can sort of double up on talent in that second round. Because they have the fourth overall pick in the college draft. I don't think you trade that in order to land a first round pick in the entry draft because of the amount of talent you have. And when I look at the board, the fourth overall, TD Ierlan's going to be there. I mean, Atlas, they don't need a face-off guy. Water Dogs don't need a face-off guy, as far as I know. I'm a little skewed because I'm a big Jake Withers guy, and Chrome certainly doesn't need a face-off guy. They have Connor Farrell. So when you look at it, like, are you willing to give up TD Ierlan to get a marginal upgrade somewhere else? That's sort of what Nat St. Laurent has to sort of wrestle with, I think, going into this draft.
The question also becomes too, if the Archers or Chaos try to jump the Redwoods in that college draft, would the Redwoods might have to again if St. Laurent wants TD Ierlan, might have to jump then again too if the Water Dogs aren't the ones that trade that pick originally. We will see. That is a lot that will be kind of unfolding in the next couple of weeks. For everyone watching and or listening, you can find the full mock draft at lacrosseflash.com. The story will be linked in the description as well. Looking at this full mock, Austin, which selection pops off the page at you as a perfect fit for both team and player that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, God. We haven't talked about it today, but Challen Rogers seems like the perfect fit for me. I'll just throw that one out there I'll give Pat a little pat on the back. Warren Jeffrey is another one. 13th pick in the draft to me. Chrome, Liam took another beauty in Brian Cole, and I think he's somebody that's criminally
I deny on Brian Cole.
Criminally underrated this year, I think. Especially what Liam talked about in the mock is just the shorter field and how it's going to benefit a lot of these Canadian guys. And Brian Cole was a standout at Maryland as well. He's a great midfielder. He was talked about as an MVP candidate in 2019, and he was fantastic for the Boston Cannons in 2020. So when you look at it, I think Brian Cole with the guys we already talked about, Karate Ranigan and McIntosh running the midfield there, even if it's a two-way, because I think Brian Cole plays transition in the indoor game. So when you look at it, he's a perfect two-way midfielder that you can put. And you could even run, say, if you want to do a Goodrich, John Ranigan, Jordan McIntosh, or Brian Cole running back on defense, like that's incredible if you're Chrome, because then you just have to move it up to your front unit, and you've got probably the best midfield in the game, I would say.
I'm looking right now at Liam's selection for Chrome at 21. He took Sean Scanone out of UNIT, NCAA D1 goalie of the year in 2019, the 2019 and 2020 MLL goalie of the year. We were talking about Tim Sudan wanting to find his heir apparent, his next goalie behind John Galloway, who is the head coach at Jacksonville. We have no idea what his future entails or what his plan is for the future, but obviously we're hearing Sudan say, "Oh, we're thinking goalie." That makes sense here as we're looking at Scanone going possibly 21st to the Chrome. We also have some coaching news to discuss. Atlas defensive coordinator Rick Beardsley yesterday stepped down as the team's assistant coach, citing differences with head coach Ben Rubier as the reason for his resign. Austin, this isn't exactly what Atlas fans want to hear right now. Their team is in the middle of a rebuild, or as we've been liking to say, a retool. This defense wasn't great last year, which is maybe a good thing, but I guess we'll see. Any thoughts on who Coach Rubier might tap to fill this role?
That's a weird bit of news to come out on, what was it, a Tuesday?
The Tuesday before the entry draft.
2 days before the entry draft. And
we hear Coach Stagnita on Twitter Spaces with Joe is talking about, oh, yeah, I got I forget the name of his assistant coach that is doing all of his watching all the film, watching all the tape on all these guys. Coach Stagnita saying, that's not my job. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But it's like day before the entry draft and like this happens. Like was not expecting this.
Yeah, it's sort of came out of left field. And I mean, I'm sort of interested that Beardsley was so open in saying, I stepped down because Rubio and I didn't agree on the philosophy of where this team needs to go with the rebuild. And when you look at it, I mean, Atlas, for all that they've done to sort of blow up their front end, the back end still looks okay. You got Tucker Durkin, who's one of the best in the world. He just missed a little bit of time due to COVID. Cade Van Raphorst was fantastic. You've got a couple guys in Pafani and Chick who are also good. I mean, you got a good base there. You just have to find replacements for Kyle Hartzell and Callum Robinson at that point. But I mean, when you look at it, it's just very odd because you sort of think that Atlas is going to go skew towards offensive players in these drafts. I know Beardsley probably wants to add another big defensive guy. I'm sure he was sort of campaigning for Ben Randall to be with that third overall pick. Maybe this is a sign that the Archers, oh my God, the Atlas, I am having a bad day, Ryan. It happens to the best of us. The Atlas want to go with Ben Randall, but maybe they go Dan Buccaro. Maybe this is sort of a sign that Ben Rubior wants to sort of skew offensive in these first couple drafts. We know he's going to take Michael Sowers first overall. But maybe he sort of tipped his hand with what Beardsley said that they want to go with the offensive side of the ball. And when you talk about a replacement, I think Dan Orestia brought up a really good point today, and Ken Clausen being a guy to look at. Rubior, I think, would be really smart to bring in Clausen. I mean, his resume as a defender and a player in the MLL speaks for itself, but he's also just a very smart mind. Obviously, his time at the University of Virginia, he was one of the best defenders in the world. I think he's the perfect guy to sort of fit in, and he's still sort of around the age of some of these veterans. So he's not going to, his voice isn't going to get lost in the room. That's what I kind of like about it. He's going to be a guy that's been in there with the players and knows what they're going through, and he can sort of relate to them a little better. I'm not saying Beardsley couldn't, but I like the Clausen idea because I think he's been through it in the pro ranks, and he can he's probably played alongside and against some of these guys as well. So he's going to be a guy that the players really like.
We will see what Rubior decides to do there to fill that defensive coordinator role, but Clausen absolutely a good option. All right, that's going to wrap up our PLL entry draft discussion for today. As I said before, the PLL entry draft goes down tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces. Make sure you don't miss it, and follow Lacrosse Flash on Instagram and Twitter for all the latest news and updates as the draft is moving along. Austin, thank you for stopping by. We will be back momentarily with Liam Kelly to talk some college lacrosse. Do not go anywhere.
Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show, Thursday, March 25. We appreciate you for watching and or listening wherever you are. Austin Owens and I just discussed the PLL entry draft, which is set for tonight, a 3-round draft set to start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces. You can go back and check that conversation out at your own leisure. But my question going into the rest of tonight is, which program will have more people talking, the PLL's entry draft or the ACC battle taking place tonight on the ACC network between the Syracuse Orange and the Duke Blue Devils? We'll watch and see as the night goes on. And joining me now to talk about just that is Liam Kelly, Lacrosse Flash writer and reporter. Liam, what's going on, my man? How you feeling?
Doing great, man. Real excited. You got the show going, and obviously first installment was awesome. So ready to get after it for number 2.
Absolutely. Hey, before we get going on Syracuse and Duke, we had a pretty big upset on Tuesday as unranked Albany knocked off number 13 UMass for their 4th win of the season. 13-12 was the final, all without a handful of players, including attackman Tehoka Nanticoke for Albany. A confidence-building win here for the Great Danes. What are your takeaways from Albany's performance in this one?
Yeah, definitely. We saw a big game, obviously, from Jacob Patterson. A lot of people remember him. He actually played with Connor Fields back in 2017, 2018. He came out with 3 and 5. But it was back and forth all the way through. It wasn't really right till the end where, Albany got that final goal that kind of pushed them over the edge. But Albany's balanced. Scott Marr lets them play in transition, go to the net right away. We saw Patterson scoring one hand. We saw Cam Haywood. He scored the behind the back on the crease. They're just having fun out there, and they're going to get wins like this, even without some of those big players, just because, they get that confidence from their coach. And you just you can't have enough fun watching this team. They're just real exciting.
Absolutely. Definitely bringing back Nanticoke, a few other names that they were missing as well. Just confidence building going into the rest of the season as we're approaching those conference championships because they are coming up very, very fast. UMass, they're handed their first loss of the season. On this coming Tuesday, they'll be traveling to Hofstra March 30th. How far do they fall in these rankings after this loss? And what do they need to do on Tuesday to prove to you that they're still worthy of a top 15 or even a top 20 spot?
I don't think they fall really as far as many people think. They had 6 games postponed already with everything. They've missed a bunch of games that were really those, steps forward. And this really is a step forward for them because even though they lose, it's 1 goal. They're building momentum heading into the rest of their season. They'll probably drop maybe, I don't know, a handful of spots, maybe a little bit more, but at the end of the day, they're just starting to get their feet under them, and they'll still be a really competitive team moving forward.
Absolutely. We just got to ask that question because we just saw Georgetown fall a handful of spots all the way to number 11 after that loss to Denver. Moving on, though, speaking of Denver, TD Ierlan will be making his much-anticipated debut this Saturday against Providence. He was set to go last week, but Denver's game with Villanova was postponed, as we've seen a handful of cancellations here throughout the month of March as a result of COVID-19 precautions. The Ivy League and Yale aren't even playing, which is why we now see TD repping the garnet and gold for Denver. Like I said, a much-anticipated debut by the likely top face-off man in this upcoming PLL college draft. Liam, how much better does TD make Denver as we're looking ahead to the last month of the season? And then as I was saying before, those conference championship, the national championship brackets, which we can probably pencil Denver being heavily involved in both of those. How much does TD mean to Denver as they pretty much go on this, I guess you could say, run here to the end of their season?
Yeah, I mean, you can't stress the importance of a guy like TD. He's 75% kind of guy in his career. He's won over 1,000 faceoffs in his career, and to bring in somebody with that, extensive, background experience, like having to play different styles, he's proven he can win in every different way. And you got your big attack front from Denver. They're scoring goals at a great pace, and they're 6-2, and they're just going to keep getting better. Their losses are to Duke and UNC. Like, those are tough games early in your schedule, and they're just improving.
Speaking about Duke, we'll get to Duke in a second. They haven't had many tough games, but outside that game against Denver. So we're talking about Denver now. They've had a few tough ACC battles, especially too, if we remember back, Denver traveled all the way out to North Carolina to play North Carolina and Duke in that same weekend. So definitely Denver getting their feet under them, it seems, especially now bringing in TD Ierlan. Seems like they'll be able to start coasting here as we near conference play. Also on Saturday, number 9 Virginia will be traveling to Notre Dame to take on the number 6 ranked Irish. Notre Dame coming off a decisive win over Cleveland State. Virginia, on the other hand, barely squeaked by Robert Morris this past weekend. Liam, what are some thoughts that you'll be keeping an eye, some things that you'll be keeping an eye out for looking at both of these teams as this game progresses?
Well, I think the big thing you got to think about, Virginia's still favored. They're the fan pick. They're kind of the Inside Lacrosse staff pick you're seeing from everyone. Dox Aitken's back. He had 3 goals this weekend. He's looking like he's not in football form. He's back to lacrosse and he's playing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Notre Dame, they got that win and they're getting all the production they need out of Pat Cavanaugh. But, Notre Dame, they're a slow it down, a pace killer type team, whereas Virginia can beat you in the half field. They can beat you in transition. Lars likes to push his guys and play up tempo, and they got all the weapons to score at will. So I'm seeing, a tight battle. Notre Dame's faceoff guys are at 85% and 71%, which is crazy. But then on the other side, you got Petey LaSala, who faces off at 70% as well. So really, it's kind of those intangibles, whoever has a better day. But I would expect to see a pretty exciting game out of both teams.
Face-off battle, I'm thinking, is definitely going to come down to that. Whoever owns those small battles, as you're saying, the intangibles, those small battles that are going to get taken, that are going to take place, face-off, ground balls, middle of the field transition, kind of who wins those battles. And we will see come that one. In the game to watch tonight, number 4 Syracuse traveling to Durham, North Carolina to take on second-ranked Duke. I heard earlier today that Syracuse is actually flying down there today prior to this game, so not a great situation to be going straight from a flight to a game against one of the best teams in the country. But as we've all seen this season, these teams will make it work to play. Let's start with Syracuse. Aside from the likely jet lag that they'll probably have to shed before this game, what do the Orange need to do to stay in this game and try to come out on top?
Well, you can never come off a plane and expect to be at your best. You know, those guys, they got to really make sure that they're paying attention to their pregame, getting back in that mindset, because the legs will be a little bit slow. But this game, I think, for Q's is going to come down to how their D end plays. You know, you got the All-American Porter, who's phenomenal goalie, but then you got to have the guys that can match the Duke firepower. I mean, you bring in Sowers for Duke, and he's just made that team, taking them to a whole nother level. But who's the guy that's going to stop him? And then, you know, from there, who's going to stop O'Neal? Who's going to stop everybody else through that midfield line? I mean, Riley Walsh started for a long time for them, and now he's a second line midi, I think. So it's tough to really hold all those guys in check, and that's going to be the big test.
Let's shift over to Duke. The preseason number 1 team lasted 4 weeks in that top spot before swapping with ACC foe North Carolina and falling to number 2. This is really Duke's first ACC, big test of the season. It's their first ACC action this season. Their ACC gauntlet will continue into the month of April with North Carolina, Notre Dame, Virginia, Notre Dame again, and then North Carolina again to close out the regular season before their ACC tournament. What are you looking to see from Duke here in what seems like a game where they really need to make a serious statement? You brought up O'Neal. You brought up Mike Sowers. It really seems like this game where they're going to come out and really shine on a big stage against a great team in Syracuse.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those guys, they can produce at every level. They're beating you in transition. They're beating you on the ride. They're beating you in the half field. Their man-up unit's phenomenal. I think for Duke to really take that next step forward, especially coming into these tighter games and, you know, playing tougher opponents, it's got to be their second line guys. It's got to be their role players that come in and fill after their top 5, top 6. They got to get production at that every time they're on their field. And, you know, they have the talent to do it, but really that's going to be what wins you a championship in May. Right. So absolutely, as long as those guys can, you know, step up and really make that difference, that's going to be where they're going to be happiest if they see that at the next level.
Duke definitely has a ton of talent. Just have to see it all come together. And it will be put on display in this one against Syracuse. And then obviously, as we're saying, these next couple ACC games that they have coming up. And another big game this weekend in the Big Ten on Sunday, number 3 Maryland will be traveling to New Jersey to take on the 5th-ranked Rutgers Scarlet Knights. The game is set to start at noon Eastern. Maryland got the better of Rutgers in their last meeting, winning 19-12. What does Rutgers need to do in this one on Sunday to flip the script and pull out a win here at home?
Really, they just got to finish. I mean, game's tight all the way through the end of 3 quarters, but Maryland was able to extend the lead just right before the 3rd ended, and then they opened up that gap in the 4th. I mean, when you look across the board, they're pretty balanced when it comes to, you know, face-off stats, the goalies. They're all pretty comparable, but, you know, you see a guy like Connor Kurtz who went 0 for 5 shooting in that first game against them. That's got to change, especially down the stretch, if you want to compete all through the 4th quarter. And then on the flip side, really with Maryland, you know, Bernhardt's going to go for maybe not 6-1 again, but he's going to do something special. He's that guy who's all over the field, just, you know, do it all type of guy. But then, you know, you got Maltz who went 4 for 4 shooting for 4 goals. Like, if Rutgers is going to want to be competitive the whole way through, you got to shut down those 2 guys. So those are really big key stats from that last game moving forward that, you know, I want to see Rutgers addressing.
The all Big Ten schedule really didn't affect Maryland as much as it has some of their conference rivals. 5-0 on the year. They've won each of their games handedly by at least 6 goals. Their offense has put up at least 18 goals on 3 different occasions. Pretty much, we know what Maryland can do. But in order to stay perfect and on top of the Big Ten, what are some things that we need to see from them this Sunday?
Well, I think that really they're going to have that level of execution. I think Rutgers is going to be their best test. I can't see Rutgers not going, you know, 8-2 right behind Maryland, maybe 9-1 if they can finish a game out. But like I said, if they want that edge, especially moving into playoffs and then into, tourney time. You want to see that next step, separating yourself at the face-off X, separating yourself at ground balls, separating yourself, the in between the lines type of stuff that really sets those championship teams apart.
Yeah, in terms of Maryland's schedule, this is really their last big test, you could say, before their conference championship comes up. Really, after Rutgers, they have Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and Johns Hopkins. Not in that exact order, but they are playing those 4 teams over their final 4 games. There are also 2 other Big Ten games going on this week featuring those 4 teams. Ohio State, the number 17 team in the country, they travel to Michigan on Saturday, coming off their first win of the season. And number 18, Johns Hopkins, will travel to Happy Valley to take on Penn State, who is one of those teams that, as I said before, have struggled mightily this season with that all Big Ten schedule. That game will be on Sunday. What is the biggest storyline out of these 2 matchups that you will be paying the most attention to?
Well, I think that it's going to be that Penn State game. Penn State they're the best 1-4 team in the country. And, you never want to be the best 1-4 team. You want to have those games, but they've lost 2 games by, I think, 2 goals apiece. They could be 3-2. And, you lose a guy like Ament. And it seems that this year we're always coming back to that. But, Mac O'Keefe is 10 goals away from the NCAA goal scoring record, but he's having to do more stuff than he has in the past. He's got to be initiating as well as, moving off ball to get open. Knies in net, Kobe Knies he's been there the whole way through from his freshman year. And, he probably hasn't started out the season the way he wanted, but if he bounces back, then Penn State can really push this Hopkins team. Hopkins won the first game 13-6, but all that can change if Penn State starts clicking. So from Hopkins, I like to see, the face-offs. They can keep competing. The Jays won 11 straight face-offs in the first meeting between these 2 teams. So if they can get those streaks and, maintain possession a lot more, then Hopkins is going to be great moving forward. They're going to be in a good place finishing out their Big Ten season. But that's kind of the big takeaway is, face-offs, and then those guys at Penn State who haven't necessarily been playing in these roles to this point in 2021.
We'll see how those 2 games, even those 3 games, including Rutgers, Maryland, all play out there on the Big Ten schedule. Some other notable college lacrosse games that we have set for this weekend. On Friday night, High Point will travel to Richmond to take on the 20th-ranked Spiders. Bucknell will head to West Point to take on Army on Saturday. We'll also see Villanova at Georgetown, Loyola off their 24-goal performance at Towson, and Holy Cross at number 16 Navy. And on Sunday, Colgate will travel to take on 10th-ranked Lehigh. We're looking forward to all those games this weekend. Liam, which one of these are you most intrigued by? And give me a nice bold prediction as one of these games, or multiple if you have one.
I'm really excited to watch this High Point Richmond game. There hasn't been a ton of talent coming out of the SoCon really in tournament in the last little while, but they're the number 2, number 3 teams in the SoCon right now. High Point, you got Asher Nolting, who he's electric whenever he touches the ball, whether he's feeding or shooting, right? So look for a high-paced High Point team to really try and take it to a Richmond team that can play slower or play faster, however they need. Army, I love watching Army play. Brendan Nichtern, he's phenomenal. He had that. I still can't get the Arya Stark, that Selly out of my head. I still see it on replay in my mind. So he's exciting to watch. Obviously, 3 Patriot League contests going on. We got Villanova, Georgetown, Big East. I think that one will be exciting to watch. Villanova didn't get their game against Denver. Georgetown's been competitive all year, so I think that would be a fun one to watch. As for prediction, I would like to see this Loyola Towson game. I think Loyola's been competitive. They've been playing real fast, but Towson just hasn't been clicking. And I think if Towson plays a bit tighter and they can get a bit more generated on offense, then they might have a chance of upsetting a very competitive Loyola team.
It seems like, too, talking about Loyola, Loyola went out, put 24 goals up this past weekend. But before that, they lost to Lehigh, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, 10-6. So it's like that turnaround. It's just being that consistency, really. I was talking to Jordan on Tuesday, and it was just that consistency that they finally were able to figure it out. We'll see if Loyola can carry that into this weekend, but obviously very excited to see Georgetown kind of a bounce back, I guess you could say, for them, even though they got a win this past weekend, bounce back after that Denver loss. But we will see. But that is going to do it for Liam and I. Liam, thank you for hopping on the show and dropping some college lacrosse knowledge for us today. For everyone watching, make sure to tune into Syracuse Duke tonight and the various games this weekend. We will be back on Tuesday to discuss the biggest storylines, so make sure to keep an eye out for that.
You're watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? So, some unfortunate news. I just left you with the incredible note that Whipsnake's face-off specialist, two-time PLL champion, the 2020 face-off specialist of the year, and the man whose name is on the back of this jersey, Joe Nardella, would be joining us. Unfortunately, we ran into some scheduling conflicts, so we will not have that interview featured in today's show. However, we will absolutely be getting Joe back on for future shows, so do not worry. Keep an eye out for that. Again, our apologies. In the meantime, make sure you're getting caught up on all that you need to know as we head into the 2021 PLL entry draft tonight. You can head on over to the Lacrosse Flash website to read the mock draft that our team has put together that Austin and I touched on a little bit today. Also, make sure to follow Lacrosse Flash on Instagram and Twitter, as well as the show itself at GL Extended. And sit back and relax, because tonight we have a big-time PLL draft as well as a huge ACC game between Syracuse and Duke on the ACC network. And on Tuesday, March 30, we will be back to recap it all. So until then, I hope that you all have an incredible day, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GLE Extended, and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.